Welcome to the BrainShape Podcast, hosted by Dr. Andrea Wilkinson, a show where we cut through the noise of the ever-growing, ever-changing world of brain health. What works and what doesn't, what's fact and what's fiction. We look at tips, tools, and techniques backed up by real scientific studies to help you keep your brain healthy and hopefully have some fun along the way. Now, here's your host, Dr. Andrea Wilkinson.
You're listening to the BrainShape Podcast, episode number 18. If you've been listening to this podcast since the beginning, you know that my mission at BrainShape is to share brain health research and inspiration to help you build your own brain healthy life. So we can talk about the 4 key pillars of brain health: physical fitness, food and nutrition, socializing, and mental considerations such as sleep, mental exercise, and stress management. But habit formation is a foundational component that will help you live the brain healthy life that you deserve. On today's episode, I'm going to be talking about habits, what habits are, how they're formed, and some tips and tricks you can use to help yourself build good habits and get rid of bad habits. If you find this information useful and inspiring, I hope that you'll share this episode with anyone who might find it valuable: a friend, a family member, a coworker. Growing our listenership really helps to grow the show and will ensure that we're able to continue to share free content with you and also recruit excellent guests for the show. So I really hope that you will share this episode with someone who might find this information valuable. So what kind of habits do you have in your life that you think are beneficial and want to keep? What are some of the bad habits that you have that you want to get rid of? And what are some new habits that you're hoping to form? Habit formation is something that I love learning about, and mastering my own habits has been and will continue to be a lifelong practice. Here we go. Here I am talking all about habits and habit formation. One of the main missions at BrainShape is to help adults who are over the age of 60 build their own brain healthy life using meaningful and personalized approaches to brain health. I talk about the 4 pillars of brain health, including physical fitness, food and nutrition, socializing, and mental considerations, which include sleeping well, stress management, and also mental challenges. But the truth of the matter is that if we're going to talk about living a brain healthy life, we have to talk about habits and how habits are formed. Because in order for you to make real, sustainable changes to your lifestyle and your brain health, we need to talk about the habits that you have currently, so the good habits and the bad habits, and talk about how they're really ruling your life. The fact is that 70% of the things that you do in a week, in a month, in a year, they're not conscious decisions. They're actually habits that you've done so often that they just become your natural standard set of behaviors. And whether you like it or not, habits play a huge part in your life. So if you want to improve your lifestyle and create a brain healthy life, you have to think about integrating new healthy habits that help to support your brain health journey. And so on today's episode, I really want to talk about habits and what they are and how they're formed, and then some tips and tricks that you can use to help optimize the healthy habits in your life. So what is a habit? Well, a habit is formed when a behavior becomes automatic and takes place without much conscious thought or effort. So, for example, when I reach for my big glass of water and drink it first thing in the morning, this is a habit. I instinctively want to drink this glass of water first thing in the morning, and it's become this automatic set of behaviors that I do in the morning as a set routine. So every morning I get up, and right next to my bed, I have this big glass of water sitting there. And so I have to bring this glass of water with me to the coffee machine. So when I turn on the coffee machine, that's then my indication that it's time to drink the water. And so I instinctively want to drink a glass of water right after I turn the coffee machine on. And it's become such an ingrained habit of mine that if I didn't have the glass of water in the morning, I would be consciously missing that activity. So after I've turned the coffee machine on, the next step is always drinking the water. And so that's really this habit that I formed. That's a really healthy habit, drinking a big glass of water in the morning. It really sort of turns your brain on, it sets your metabolism, it hydrates you. And so it's a really important habit that I've built and one that I have incorporated successfully into my morning routine. How long does it take to form a habit? That's a really good question that you actually will, if you read about the length of time it takes to form a habit, you will see a variety of responses. So some research says it takes 21 days. Some say it's 30 days. I've even read that it can take up to 66 days of executing a specific behavior before it becomes a habit. But the truth of the matter is that habit formation is ongoing. Even if I have a good habit of exercising daily, I need to keep at it, keep my healthy habit intact. So according to James Clear, so he's the author of an excellent book called Atomic Habits. In order for us to make a habit automatic and learned, the key is really repetition. You have to put in your reps in order to develop a behavior that is dependent on a cue and exists outside of your motivated tendencies. Habits are so important because they guide our behavior. So when I crave something sweet or a candy in the late afternoon, so around 3 p.m., it's an unhealthy habit that I have developed and a habit that sort of takes over when motivation has waned. I want to eat healthy. I don't want to eat sweets in the late afternoon, but when the clock strikes around 2 or 3 p.m., the sugar cravings start. And I know this is a habit because my behavior is really context-based and manifests itself automatically. So as soon as it's that time of day, late afternoon, it's actually around 2 o'clock right now as I'm recording this podcast. And so the sweet tooth craving is bound to approach at any minute. But really, as soon as it's around that time of day, 2, 3 in the afternoon, the urge and the need to eat something sweet really becomes this drive of mine, and it arises subconsciously. Have you ever noticed that good or healthy habits are harder to make and keep, whereas bad or unhealthy habits are really challenging to break? And it's really curious. And have you ever thought about why that's the case? Well, according to James Clear, so the author of that book that I mentioned, Atomic Habits, habits that are immediately rewarding or are more likely to be repeated. So oftentimes when we have a good or healthy habit, they're harder to form and to keep because the reward is more long-term. So a good habit, for example, would be drinking enough water every day or eating your vegetables or exercising daily. But the benefits, the rewards of being healthy and exercising and drinking enough water are really long-term. You oftentimes don't get an immediate benefit from those healthy actions. Whereas a bad or unhealthy habit, oftentimes the reward is more immediate. And so it's more likely that we're going to make and keep these bad habits because the reward is so immediately felt. What do I mean by this? Well, we can look at some examples. So a bad habit, for example, would be eating a donut. And there's an immediate benefit to eating a donut. It immediately tastes good. It immediately gives you this sort of surge of energy that's not going to last. It's tasty and gooey and delicious. And so it has those immediate rewards. And the reward happens right at the moment that you're eating the donut, even though the long-term impact of eating the donuts is bad and it's not good for our health. In contrast, good habits are usually rewarding more in the long term. So if you go to the gym, it takes effort and dedication and continuously exercising and doing the weights before you start feeling the results and seeing the results. And this is really why bad habits are harder to eliminate and good habits are harder to create, because we want the immediate reward and the immediate results. So according to James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, that I will be mentioning a lot in today's episode, and I have been mentioning him a lot, but I will continue to do so. According to James Clear, what we need to do is to try to bring the long-term negative consequences of the bad habits into the immediate future so that you feel the pain, and also bring the long-term positive impacts of the good, healthy habits into the immediate future so you can reap some of the rewards now and continue the good behavior. So how is it that we can do this? We can talk about bringing the negative consequences of eating sweets or eating the donuts into the present. So as I mentioned, I have a bad habit of having a sweet tooth craving around 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And if I want to bring the negative consequences of eating those sweets into the current moment, I can bring or attempt to bring conscious awareness to how eating the sweets makes me feel. So oftentimes the candy or the donut or the sweet piece of food, the food item that we're eating, is delicious in that exact moment. But oftentimes I eat too much candy and I actually get a tummy ache from eating too much sugar. So I can really bring some conscious awareness into how the sugar is making me feel quite soon after consuming it, within half an hour or so. So I might get this immediate benefit or surge of positive feedback from eating the candy at that moment. But the long term or the soon after sort of experience of eating that candy is negative. And so I can really bring conscious awareness to how I'm feeling, that eating the candy doesn't make me feel good. It actually makes me feel sluggish. And eventually my energy levels, like there is a immediate spike in energy right after eating the sugar, but oftentimes very soon after consuming a lot of sugar, your energy levels will dip to a level that's below the amount of energy you had before you even ate the candy. So I'll often feel sluggish and tired, and I'll have a tummy ache. And so I really need to bring conscious awareness to that feeling and that experience after having eaten the sugar. And what about bringing the reward or the benefit of the healthy or the good habit into the immediate present? So for example, if I go for a run and I exercise, I usually exercise for about 30 minutes every single day, whether it's running or walking, just being outside. I really promote and encourage people to exercise every single day. I like going for a run. It's a good, healthy habit that I have, but the health benefits, so including weight loss and body toning, that arise from exercising on a regular basis, these sort of health benefits usually take a long time to be seen. And so the reward or the benefits of the behavior is long-term, as I mentioned, and that's why good habits are harder to form. So how can I bring some of that long-term positive impact of my good, healthy habit of exercising every day into the immediate future? Well, I can focus on other things. Instead of focusing on weight loss and body tone, I can really start to think about what are the immediate benefits that I get from running. So I can focus on my energy levels, because I usually feel way more energetic and lively and alert following a run. I can also focus on how my mind is clear following a run, and it really increases my ability to focus for the day. So if I shift my focus to looking for the immediate reward, the immediate positive impact of my good behavior, I'll increase my likelihood of keeping up the good habit or the good behavior. And as James Clear said, and I quote, "Habits that are immediately rewarding are more likely to be repeated." So it's really important to keep that in mind when you are forming your own healthy habits, is you want to make sure that the reward or benefit of engaging in that behavior, in that positive lifestyle action, you want that to have an immediate reward for yourself. And so you'll be more likely to repeat the behavior. I encourage you to take a minute to sit and think about some of your good habits that you have and some of your bad habits, and write them down and really think about when they happen in your life. So what are my top 3 good habits? So I have a good habit of drinking my big glass of water every morning when I wake up. I have a good habit of exercising daily in some form. So it could just be walking around the block or going on a run or just being outside and moving my body for 30 minutes every day. And I also have a good habit of journaling. So I express gratitude, I set my intentions for the day, and I do some visioning for my future self and where I want to be. Some bad habits that I have, we already talked about one. So that is eating sweets in the afternoon. So around 2-3 p.m., I have a sweet tooth craving that I'm really trying to break that habit down or switch the action that I take. So instead of eating candy, what else can I eat that'll help satisfy that sweet tooth craving? One sort of side note option that I've come up with is I drink berry tea, which for some reason seems to satisfy my sweet tooth craving. Anyways, I digress. Some other bad habits that I have, watching Netflix before bed instead of reading my book. That's a bad habit because looking at a screen emits blue light, and blue light really wakes our brain up. And so it's counterintuitive if I'm going to be watching Netflix or looking at a computer screen before bed, because it actually makes it harder for me to fall asleep. And I really want to get into a better habit of getting to sleep earlier and waking up earlier. And so watching Netflix before bed is a bad habit that I'm trying to break. And another bad habit that I have is I really get distracted when I'm trying to focus on a single task. So I have a lot of to-dos going on with my business and other part-time work that I have. And I get really distracted with the tens of other things that I have on my to-do list when I just need to focus on one. And so oftentimes I find when I'm sitting down to do a specific task, my brain starts thinking about and spitballing all of the other things that I need to do or not forget to do or keep in mind. And so that's an interesting bad habit that I'm trying to sort of retrain my brain around. How do habits work? So if we're going to talk about building good, healthy habits for our brain healthy life, we also need to understand how habits are formed and how habit formation really works. So depending on who you ask, you might hear a couple of different things, but habits really consist of 3 main components: a cue or a trigger, an action, and a reward. So the cue or the trigger is something that happens, and then your brain goes, and now we do X. So the cue or the trigger could be getting out of bed in the morning. It could be a certain time of day. It could be that after you put on your running shoes, X behavior happens. Maybe you go out for a run or a walk. So the cue is the thing that happens right before you complete the habitual action. The action is, and I'm sure you can guess it, is the habitual behavior. So the cue is I get up in the morning, the action is I drink my big glass of water, and the last piece is the reward. So what's the benefit of executing on that behavior? And drinking the big glass of water, it makes my brain more alert, it kickstarts my metabolism, and it really hydrates me. So there's all these rewards of executing on that behavior. What's another example for the cue, action, reward sort of model of habit formation? We can take my morning habit of journaling as another example. So every morning I write in my journal to express gratitude and set my intentions for the day. So for my journaling habit, the cue or trigger that starts the behavior is pouring my morning cup of coffee. When I pour my morning cup of coffee, the next thing that I always do is write in my journal. So the cue or the trigger is pouring in the cup of coffee. And the action, of course, is the actual act of writing in my journal. And the reward of writing in my journal is that I feel grateful and focused for the day ahead. Another example is exercising. So the cue or trigger is me putting on my gym clothes. So when I put on my gym clothes, I know that it is time to exercise. The action or behavior is actually doing the workout. So whether that's going for a run or going to the gym to lift weights. And the reward is that I feel good, my body feels good, my mind feels clear, and that is the reward of exercising. It really is good. I mean, it's good for a lot of reasons. It's also good for our cardiovascular health, and maintaining muscle mass and flexibility is important for having an independent lifestyle and life for a long time. But the immediate reward for me for exercising is that I really feel good. My body feels good. I feel clear, my mind feels clear, and I feel healthy. And so it's just a really good feeling for me to exercise. A bad habit example is, say, if someone has a drink, so an alcoholic beverage, or they eat junk food whenever they're feeling stressed out. So the cue is feeling stressed. So something happens and you feel stressed out, and the action is, for some people, it might be having an alcoholic beverage or eating junk food. So that's the behavior, and the reward is the perception that having the alcoholic beverage or eating the sweets has somehow helped to reduce or minimize the stress. And maybe it's the case that your mind gets sort of refocused somewhere else. So it's refocused to the good feelings of eating the delicious junk food or having a cocktail. But this reward is this perception of reduced stress. But in actual fact, you're not really reducing the stress. You're just kind of distracting yourself from the stress. So that's an example of a bad habit. When we want to think about creating and building healthier habits, we have to start thinking about this model, this three-pronged model of habit formation: the cue or trigger, the action or behavior, and the reward. What is true is that you can't often change the cue. So I'm going to feel tired in the afternoon. It's going to be 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. I'm going to get out of bed. I'm going to feel stressed. So those are all examples of cues. You can't change the cue, but what you can change is the behavior that you take, the action that you take following that cue. So if we take the example of feeling stressed and then having an alcoholic beverage, I can't change the fact that I'm experiencing stress. The stressor, the stressful situation, whatever it may be, will continue to happen. What I have to think about is changing the action. What action do I take following that stress? So instead of having a drink because I'm experiencing stress, perhaps I can go for a walk or call a friend or cook a meal. For me personally, cooking is a huge stress reliever. Maybe I could take a 2-minute mindfulness break. And so it's all about changing the action or the behavior. The cue still happens. I still feel stress, but what other action can I take that'll help me minimize the stress? And maybe it is in line with a distraction. So similar to what the alcoholic beverage did, but it's a more healthy alternative. So going for a walk, calling a friend, or taking a 2-minute mindfulness break are all great examples of alternative actions you can take to the stress cue. And the reward is you'll still feel a lot better about that stress. The reduction in stress will still be perceived. Habits are so central to building a healthy lifestyle, but they can also be a huge barrier when the habits are unhealthy ones. So what I really hope that you'll get out of this episode is an understanding of how habits are formed and how we can create or tweak our bad behaviors to make them healthier, or how we can create healthy habits that can help facilitate our own brain health. And so I hope that you took a few minutes to write down some of the habits that you have, good habits, good healthy habits, as well as bad and unhealthy habits. And I want you to take that list of habits that you've written down. And so obviously I only want you to do this if you're not driving or doing something where you're busy. If you are sitting at home, I want you to take a minute to think about the cue, action, and reward cycle of the habits that you've identified for yourself. So for the cue, what happens right before you engage in your habitual behavior? So for example, if your habit is going for a walk, that's your behavior. What time do you typically go for a walk? Or is it right after you have your morning cup of coffee that you go for a walk? What articles of clothing or footwear do you put on before you head out? So that could also be a cue that leads to the action of taking a walk. And the reward, of course, is that you feel good and energized and healthy for having gone for that walk and taken the time out to take care of your health. What I would like you to do is pay attention to the habits that are currently guiding your day and identify what it is that you want to change about it. Remember that you can't often change the cue, but you can change the behavior or the action, and you can also change the reward or the perceived reward. So if you want to form a new habit, it's really helpful to attach this new behavior that you want to take on to a cue that already naturally happens in your life. So for example, getting out of bed, or sitting in your favorite chair to read at night, or making a cup of coffee, or a specific time of day. Attaching this positive behavior to a cue that already naturally happens in your life will really help set you up for success. So what are some new healthy habits that you want to start or continue? And what are some negative or unhealthy habits that you want to do away with? So when building habits, good healthy habits, one really powerful trick is to keep track of your success, because you want to build confidence in your ability to form the new habit. And for that, to have confidence, you really need proof, and the proof is in the behavior. So of course, and needless to say, you're not going to succeed perfectly the first time you try to execute on a new habitual behavior, but it's so important that you keep at it and really encourage yourself to continue on. And if you do keep at it and keep trying, even if you're not perfect at it, I promise you're going to see improvements over time. It just takes a level of dedication and really not quitting on yourself. Now I'd like to share some tips on how to form habits, how to form good, healthy habits. So my first tip number 1, is to break your goals down into manageable chunks. Identify the steps required to form a good habit. So this is taken out of James Clear's book. I know you can guess it because I've talked a lot about it in this episode. The book is called Atomic Habits. And when they talk about habit shaping, they really talk about breaking habits down into 5 phases. But this is so that they are in manageable chunks that people can successfully achieve. And once you finish one phase, you can then move on to the next. And it's so important because we want to build habits in a sustainable way, and we need to create proof for ourselves that we're able to accomplish a task. So you can't go from not exercising at all to running a 10-kilometer race or a 10-kilometer distance. That's not realistic. You have to break it down into manageable chunks so that you can successfully achieve your goals along the way. So in James Clear's book, Atomic Habits, they talk about habit shaping, and one of them is starting to exercise. And I think that that is a good example for me to go through on the podcast because it's one of the 4 key pillars of brain health is exercise and moving your body. So in phase 1 of building the habit of exercising, according to James Clear, it's just changing into your workout clothes. That's it. Putting on your workout clothes is phase 1. And once you have accomplished this, the next phase will be to step out of the door. So wearing your workout clothes and going outside. So maybe that will be going for a walk. And you continuously show up in that way. You put on your gym clothes, you go for a walk, and that's all you do. Then when you've successfully achieved phase 2 repeatedly and have that habit sort of formed, you can then go on to phase 3, which is driving down to the gym and exercising for 5 minutes. And that's it. So now you've gone through 3 phases. You put your workout clothes on. You are now driving to the gym and exercising for 5 minutes only, but it is through repeatedly showing up for yourself that you are going to be able to successfully create this habit. The next phase, phase 4, is exercising for 15 minutes, at least 1 time per week. And so what I hope is becoming clear in this example is that each phase you are boosting up the challenge and dedication that's needed on your part to be able to successfully execute the habitual behavior. So phase 4, now you are putting on your gym clothes, you're driving to the gym, and you're exercising for 15 minutes in the gym at least 1 time per week. And then phase 5, and this is based on the goal that you set out for yourself. So this person wants to exercise 3 times per week. And now that they've successfully gone to the gym 1 time a week for 15-minute exercises, they've been habitually engaging in that behavior. Now they can move on to phase 5, which is exercising 3 times per week. And so I hope that this example really clearly illustrates how you have to sort of take these baby steps and create habits and healthy habits in a stepwise fashion to increase your likelihood of success. Tip number 2 is make a habit that you want to create. Make the habit so easy to start. So behaviors are often really hard to start, but they're easy to finish. So James Clear talks a lot about this concept in his book. He calls it the physics of productivity. And he talks about that being in line with Newton's first law, which is that objects that are in motion stay in motion. So once a behavior has begun, it's super easy to keep at it and move forward. So how does this work in habit formation? Most of the friction associated with a good habit or a healthy behavior happens at the beginning of the action. So the most important piece in when we're trying to create and build new healthy habits is getting started. So make the start so easy that you can't say no. And in that first example that I gave with going through the different phases of habit shaping, putting on your gym shoes is the first phase. So it's a habit or a behavior that is so easy that you cannot say no. All you have to do is put on your gym shoes. You're going to do that, right? Because that is super easy to execute. So you make the starting action so easy that you can't say no. And the key to being motivated, which a lot of people talk about in terms of habit formation, but we're talking about creating habits in the absence of motivation, because being motivated has little to do with feelings of inspiration and drive and more to do with just getting started in the first place. It's so much easier, as I mentioned, to finish a task than it is to start a task. So the key to getting motivated and creating these healthy habits is to make it so easy to start. And this is often the cue in the habit formation model. So what is it that starts the behavior? So it could be, for example, putting on your running shoes before you go for an exercise. For my other examples, the cue was pouring a cup of coffee before I start journaling. Pouring my cup of coffee is super easy to do. So it's so easy that I can't say no. Another sort of cue or action that starts my behavior is getting into bed before I read my book. Getting into bed is a super easy action to take on. And so it's so easy that I can't say no. My third tip for making and creating good, healthy habits is to make the habit attractive. So what is rewarded is repeated, and what is punished is avoided. So this is James Clear's cardinal rule of habit formation. You need to figure out how to make your desired habitual behavior satisfying to you in some way. And I mentioned this earlier, but habits that are immediately rewarding are more likely to be repeated. So according to James Clear, we really have to bring the long-term rewards of a healthy, good behavior into the immediate future or the present to help it be felt, help the rewards and benefits be known. So try to make the reward for a given behavior, if it's a positive behavior, make it as immediate as possible. And a good example of this is brushing your teeth. So this is a good habitual behavior that most of us have created a habit around brushing our teeth. But interestingly, toothpaste doesn't actually have to be mint flavored, but it is mint flavored because it creates this immediate satisfaction following brushing your teeth, because your mouth feels clean and you have that minty, fresh feeling in your mouth after having brushed your teeth. And so it is easier to now create this habitual behavior of brushing your teeth because we want that immediate reward of having a clean mouth. And this kind of makes sense if we think about how habits are reinforced. Habits are really these dopamine-driven feedback loops, and dopamine is a neurotransmitter or a brain chemical that's associated with feelings of bliss and euphoria, concentration, and motivation. So we want to create opportunities to get this dopamine hit in our brains. So any habit that you want to stop, you should try to create an immediate bad consequence that you can associate with this negative habit that you have. And any behavior that you want to build or create a habit around, you have to attach an immediate benefit that goes along with the good behavior. So after I go for a run, I have a nice relaxing shower and I eat a delicious meal. So that could be my immediate reward for having gone for the run. But also, as I mentioned, I feel really good after I go for a run. I'm not necessarily interested or excited about the run while I'm going for the run, but the immediate reward after having gone for the run is mental clarity. I feel energized, my body feels good, and I sort of create this reward for myself by treating myself to a nice, delicious lunch afterwards. Tip number 4 is ground your habits in your identity. Your habits provide evidence of who it is that you want to be. And each of our behaviors casts a vote for who it is that we want to become. So if I go to the gym, I cast a vote for someone who is fit and exercises. If I play guitar, I'm casting a vote for a type of person who's a musician and plays an instrument. If I do X, you cast a vote for Y type of person. So think about that in terms of each of our behaviors casts a vote, and you need to sort of check in with yourself and ask yourself whether the behavior that you are engaging in casts a vote for the person that you want to become. And according to James Clear, he suggests a simple 2-step process that you can start rewriting your own identity. And he mentions this in his Atomic Habits book. So you first have to decide who it is that you want to be. You want to be the person that exercises. You want to be the person that journals every day. You want to be the person that is hydrated. You want to be the person that is focused on task and doesn't get distracted. That's the first step, decide who you want to be. The second step is to use small wins to reinforce that identity, because our new identities, while we're creating new identities for ourselves, it requires evidence. It requires new evidence that we are now able to satisfy this new identity. So if you keep casting the same votes that you've always cast in the past, you're going to get the same results that you've always had. Because if nothing changes, the fact is that nothing's going to change. If I want a new habitual behavior, I have to start casting new votes for myself so that I can create this new identity and reinforce this new identity with tangible evidence. Tip number 5, surround yourself with people who engage in the habit that you want to have. So if you want to build a habit of running, seek out a group of people who engage in this habit on a regular basis. So in Toronto, for example, there's the running room, and it's people that get together, I think it is multiple times a week at different times of the day, who go out and run. The people around us and their habits play a critical role in our own habit formation. So it's really important to pay attention to the people that you're surrounding yourself with and how their habitual behaviors are reinforcing your own habitual behaviors. And if you want to create these new, positive, healthy habits, you have to surround yourself with people who also have adopted this healthy behavior. And this is a quote from James Clear's Atomic Habits book. One of the most effective things you can do to build better habits is to join a culture where your desired behavior is the normal behavior. New habits seem achievable when you see others doing them every single day. And so it's so important that we surround ourselves with the right types of people. And there is that saying that the 5 people that you spend the most time with are the people that really impact who you are and your identity. So it's really important to think about that when you're trying to form healthy habits. And tip number 6 is create an environment that supports your habits. So this goes in line with tip number 5 about surrounding yourself with people that are engaging in the habit that you want to take on. So surrounding yourself with people that are a positive influence on your life. This one is also about changing your physical environment. So creating a physical environment that supports your habits, because you want to create an environment that makes it easy for you to show up in the way that you want to show up. Even a little bit of friction will make people want to quit. So it's really important to optimize your environment to reduce the amount of friction that you experience. So for good habits, you want to create a physical environment that encourages that behavior. So if you want to exercise often, it's perhaps leaving your gym clothes out where you can see them. It's putting your running shoes by the door. It's keeping your house stocked with good, healthy foods. And for bad habits, you want to create an environment that makes the habit or the poor habitual behavior invisible or more difficult to execute. So, for example, not having sweets in my house makes it easier for me to not eat sweets when I have the craving in the late afternoon. If I want to not look at my phone and watch Netflix when I'm in bed and I would rather read my book, I need to not have my phone in the bedroom because I can't look at my phone and watch Netflix if my phone's not even in the bedroom. So it makes it harder for me to execute this bad behavior of watching Netflix in bed if I don't even have my phone in the bedroom. So I create an environment for myself that supports my good habits and makes it more difficult for me to execute on my bad habits. You want to take the bad habits that you have and create friction that makes it harder to execute on that behavior, that makes that behavior invisible or more challenging. And then you want to take the good habits and make it more obvious and make it easier to execute. So for example, this was years ago now, but I was going on social media too often. And so what I did was I just took the Facebook app off of my phone. So now if I want to go on Facebook, I have to go to my internet app, then type in facebook.com, manually log in, and then I can look at Facebook. And so I've created this friction for myself that makes it more difficult for me to log into Facebook. And that has actually really reduced how much I'm going on social media. You want to create less temptations for yourself in regards to the bad habits that you have. The way to success is not willpower. People who have good habits are oftentimes just tempted less. So they just have to execute the mental capacity to fight a given urge when it comes up the few times that it comes up. Those are my top 6 strategies to help you build good, healthy habits in your life. And I hope that you found them useful, and I hope that you will execute those tips and tricks that I've mentioned. And I'll conclude by saying this. To start a good habit, fundamentally, you want to reduce the friction in your environment and you want to master the art of showing up. Reduce friction by creating an environment that supports your good, healthy habits and an environment that makes your poor, unhealthy habits really difficult to execute on. And mastering the art of showing up is fundamental when it comes to creating good, healthy habits. Each of your behaviors casts a vote for who it is that you want to become. And by showing up consistently and repetitively, you teach yourself that you are the person that you want to become. You are the person that exercises every day, if that's your goal. You are the person that drinks enough water. You are the person that gets enough sleep. You are the person that challenges themselves mentally on a regular basis. And the way that you teach yourself that you are that person and how to own that identity is by showing up in a way that supports that identity using your habitual behaviors. And James Clear once said, "The quality of our lives depends on the quality of our habits." If you've missed any of this, you can dive into the show notes for this episode and all past episodes at www.brainshape.ca/podcast. To access the show notes from today's episode specifically, just type episode 18 in the search bar and today's episode will pop right up. Thank you so much for tuning in. I hope that this episode provided you with insightful information about habit formation and tips and tricks you can use to help build good habits and get rid of bad ones. Remember, the key to making a habit automatic and learned is repetition. You have to put in your reps. Show up for yourself by behaving in a way that promotes the good, healthy lifestyle that you seek. Start small and work up from there. Don't forget to subscribe to the podcast so that you'll be notified every time we publish a new episode. And since we're a weekly show, I'll see you back here next week. In the meantime, you can follow me on social media at BrainShapeTO, and be sure to let me know if there are any specific topics that you want me to cover on the podcast. Until next time, keep your brain in shape. And as always, it's been such a pleasure hanging out with you.